The crystalline structure of Vrin's exoskeleton refracted the dim emergency lights as she dragged herself across the command bridge of the Linarith. 23 cycles had passed since the catastrophic engine failure that had left her vessel stranded in the void between star systems. 23 cycles alone, the sole survivor of a crew of 18 Qualaxians. A warning klaxon blared, interrupting the oppressive silence that had become her only companion. Vrin's antennae twitched involuntarily as she pulled herself toward the sensor console, expecting yet another system failure. What she saw instead froze her six-chambered heart. "Impossible," she whispered, her translator device converting her native clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. There are no shipping lanes within 50 parsecs. Yet the readings were clear. An unknown vessel was approaching rapidly. In all her years as an explorer mapping the fringes of the Andromeda Arm, Vrin had never encountered another ship this far into the emptiness. Her species had long believed themselves to be the only advanced civilization capable of venturing this deep into uncharted space. With trembling appendages, she activated the Linarith's nearly depleted communication array, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. "This is Science Officer Vrin of the Qualaxian exploration vessel Linarith. Our systems have failed, requesting immediate assistance." She waited, mandibles clicking nervously. The approaching vessel was unlike any configuration in the Qualaxian database. Bulky, asymmetrical, with oddly arranged propulsion systems. Primitive, yet somehow crossing vast distances. The Linarith's computers struggled to analyze its composition. "Unknown vessel, please respond," Vrin tried again, desperation creeping into her voice. The life support systems had been failing for days. Without help, she calculated no more than 2 cycles of breathable atmosphere remained. Static crackled across the comm system before resolving into words, not in galactic common, but in a language the translator took several moments to process. "Linarith, this is Captain Elowen Riker of the United Earth vessel Pathfinder. We've received your distress call and are preparing to render assistance. Stand by for docking procedures." United Earth? Vrin's compound eyes dilated in shock. The mythical, isolated world from the prohibited zone, the stories told to juvenile Qualaxians as cautionary tales. Humans were supposed to be theoretical, dangerous primitives quarantined by the ancient precursor races for their unpredictable nature. Yet here they were, in impossible space, offering impossible help. The ship drew closer, its detailed structure becoming visible through the Linarith's viewport. Crude by Qualaxian standards, covered in what appeared to be hastily applied patches and modifications, but undeniably functional. How had they achieved deep space travel with such technology? "Our scans show your atmosphere is compromised," the human voice continued. "We're sending over a boarding team with compatible respiratory equipment. Please do not be alarmed by our appearance." Vrin's mandibles clicked rapidly in what would have been nervous laughter among her kind. The human was concerned about alarming her. Did they not know that Qualaxians stood over 3 meters tall with crystalline exoskeletons and compound eyes? That their very biology was based on silicon rather than carbon? The docking procedure began, the human vessel extending a flexible corridor that adapted to the Linarith's unusual port configuration. Another impossibility. Vrin's species had spent centuries perfecting their docking systems, yet these humans had apparently created one that could interface with unknown alien technology on first contact. As the airlock cycled, Vrin braced herself against the command console, her strength fading. The inner door slid open, revealing 3 figures in environmental suits. They removed their helmets, exposing faces that would haunt Vrin's memory forever. Flat, with forward-facing eyes, peculiar nasal protrusions, and skin in various shades of beige and brown. "Officer Vrin?" the lead human asked, displaying teeth in what Vrin would later learn was called a smile. "I'm Lieutenant Kestra Voss. We're here to bring you home." The Pathfinder's medical bay was a bewildering assault on Vrin's senses, compared to the sterile, mathematically precise facilities of Qualaxian vessels. This human space was chaotic. Instruments stored at odd angles, monitors displaying fluctuating data in kaleidoscopic colors, and everywhere the scent of organic compounds that the ship's filtration system couldn't quite eliminate. "Your physiology is fascinating," said Dr. Nasira Ombati, the ship's chief medical officer, as she adjusted settings on what appeared to be a modified atmospheric regulator. "Silicon-based, just like the theoretical papers suggested. I've never actually treated a non-carbon life form before." Vrin's translator struggled with the doctor's accent, which contained linguistic patterns not in its database. "You knew of my species before today?" "Not specifically," Dr. Ombati replied, examining readouts from a handheld scanner. "But humanity has theorized about silicon-based life since our earliest days of space exploration. Your biological structure confirms several hypotheses from the 22nd century." Captain Riker entered, bringing with her what Vrin recognized as parts salvaged from the Linarith. "Our engineers think they can integrate some of your technology with ours to create a more suitable environment for you," she explained. "Lieutenant Commander Gavril is particularly excited about your crystalline computing cores." Vrin's exoskeleton dimmed in confusion, a Qualaxian expression of disbelief. "You understand our technology already?" "Understand? No," Captain Riker laughed. "But Gavril has an uncanny knack for making disparate systems work together. He says your tech is elegant. Beautiful math," were his exact words. What puzzled Vrin most was not the humans' technological adaptability, impressive though it was, but their inexplicable presence in this remote region. The question had been burning in her mind since rescue. "Captain Riker, why is your vessel here? This sector is," she searched for the right word, "empty. Nothing of value exists within 50 parsecs." The captain shared a look with Dr. Ombati that Vrin couldn't interpret. "We're explorers, Officer Vrin. The Pathfinder is mapping what we call the Deep Black, the spaces between spiral arms where conventional wisdom says nothing exists." "But that defies logical resource allocation," Vrin countered. "The Qualaxian Science Directorate calculated minimal probability of discovery in these regions. My mission was considered wasteful by many." "Humans have a different relationship with probability," Dr. Ombati offered with a gentle smile. "We have a saying, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence." Before Vrin could process this peculiar philosophy, a loud crash echoed from an adjacent room, followed by what her translator identified as creative profanity. "That would be Gavril," Captain Riker sighed. "He tends to get enthusiastic." A tall human with pale skin and a wild tangle of red hair burst through the doorway, carrying what appeared to be a modified version of the Linarith's navigation crystal. "Captain, this storage device contains stellar cartography covering regions we've never documented. It's at least 3 times more detailed than our best maps." Vrin's antennae drooped in embarrassment. "Those are merely standard survey records. Qualaxian mapping technology has been refined over 12,000 cycles." The humans exchanged glances of what Vrin would later learn was excitement rather than the disappointment she expected. "Officer Vrin," Captain Riker said carefully, "would you be willing to share this knowledge with humanity? In exchange, we offer safe passage to the nearest outpost where you might contact your people." "That would violate Protocol 7 of the Science Directorate," Vrin replied automatically, then hesitated. Protocol 7 also forbade accepting assistance from unrecognized species, yet here she was, breathing through human-modified atmospheric regulators alive only because these impossible beings had defied probability. Later, as Vrin rested in her hastily adapted quarters, she watched through a viewport as crew members in environmental suits worked to salvage critical components from the Linarith. Their movements lacked the precision of Qualaxian engineers, Yet they accomplished tasks her training deemed impossible with their limited technology. Most striking was their seemingly illogical approach. They attempted procedures with high failure probabilities, adjusted when they failed, and attempted again with modifications. No Qualaxian would waste resources on attempts calculated to fail. Yet these humans succeeded through this very inefficiency. As she drifted into restorative sleep, Vryn wondered if perhaps the ancient warnings about humans contained more truth than her people realized. Not because humans were dangerous, but because they were dangerous to everything Qualaxians believed about the universe and its immutable laws. "They call it coffee," explained Ensign Orla Njeri, pushing a steaming container toward Vryn. "It's completely incompatible with your biology, but Captain thought you might enjoy the ritual of sharing a meal." The Pathfinder's mess hall buzzed with activity as off-duty crew members stole glances at their unusual guest. Vryn's towering crystalline form, nearly scraping the ceiling when standing, made hiding impossible. Rather than retreat to her quarters, she had accepted Captain Riker's invitation to mingle, a concept without direct translation in Qualaxian culture. "The gesture is appreciated," Vryn replied, observing how the dark liquid swirled with convection currents. "In Qualaxian vessels, nutrient consumption is solitary and efficient." That sounds. Ensign Njeri searched for words. Lonely. Efficiency. "And loneliness are not concepts we associate," Vryn explained. "Individual optimization benefits collective function." A crew member Vryn hadn't met before dropped uninvited into the seat beside Njeri. "Like a hive mind?" he asked, eyes bright. "With curiosity." "Evo!" Njeri hissed. "That's rude." "My apologies," the man said, offering what Vryn now recognized as an embarrassed smile. "Lieutenant Ivo Marquez, xenobiology specialist. I've been analyzing the medical data from your examination, but Dr. Ombati said I couldn't bother you with questions until you'd adjusted." "Questions do not bother Qualaxians," Vryn replied. "Knowledge exchange is our primary social function." Marquez's face lit up. "Perfect. I have about 300 questions about your crystalline neural pathways." Njeri groaned. "Please ignore him. He's brilliant, but lacks what we call social grace." "The concept is unfamiliar," Vryn admitted. "Why would intelligence be constrained? By arbitrary interaction protocols? See?" Marquez gestured triumphantly. "She gets it?" Their conversation was interrupted by a ship-wide announcement. "All senior officers to the bridge. Lieutenant Marquez, bring our guest." The bridge of the Pathfinder was a stark contrast to the mathematical precision of the Linarith. Where Qualaxian, design emphasized symmetry and minimalism. The human bridge was a cacophony of displays, workstations arranged in concentric circles, and crew members who seemed to be constantly in motion. "We've detected something," Captain Riker said without preamble, using the coordinates extracted from your navigation crystal. On the main view screen, a massive structure floated against the backdrop of space, clearly artificial, yet appearing almost organic in its configuration. Geometric patterns covered its surface, reminiscent of Qualaxian script, but far more ancient. "Impossible," Vryn whispered, her exoskeleton pulsing with pale blue light, a sign of extreme agitation. "This region was surveyed 7 times. No structures exist here." "It wasn't there yesterday," confirmed the ship's navigator. "It appeared approximately 3 hours ago." Lieutenant Commander Gavril manipulated a console, enhancing certain sections of the image. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our database, but there's something familiar about the configuration. It resembles patterns from your ship's crystal matrix," Captain Riker said to Vryn. "Do you recognize it?" Vryn's antennae trembled. "It bears similarities to theoretical structures in ancient Qualaxian texts, what we call precursor artifacts. But none have been confirmed to exist." "Precursors?" Lieutenant Marquez leaned forward. "Like an ancient advanced civilization?" "Multiple civilizations," Vryn corrected. The foundational texts of Qualaxian science describe 17 distinct precursor species that supposedly seeded our galaxy with life before departing to elsewhere. Captain Riker studied the structure with narrowed eyes. And one just happened to appear after we salvaged your navigation crystal? Coincidence is mathematically improbable, Vryn agreed. I've learned that coincidence and mathematics don't always agree out here, Captain Riker replied, especially where precursor technology might be involved. The sensor officer interrupted. Captain, we're detecting an energy surge from the structure. I think it's scanning us. Before anyone could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered and displayed the same symbol, an intricate geometric pattern that Vryn recognized immediately. That is the Qualaxian glyph for revelation, she said, her voice barely audible. Symbols shifted, forming new patterns that even Vryn's advanced mind struggled to comprehend. The humans watched in confused silence, but something deep within Vryn's consciousness resonated with the changing symbols. It's a message, she finally said. But not for humans. It's responding to my presence specifically. Captain Riker turned to her, expression grave. What does it say? It says... Vryn's translator fell silent as she struggled to convert concepts that existed beyond language. It says the experiment is reaching completion, that the isolated variable has breached containment. Isolated variable? Lieutenant Marquez asked. I believe, Vryn said slowly, it refers to humanity. So let me understand this, Captain Riker said, pacing the conference room where the senior staff had gathered after the precursor structure had gone dormant. According to this artifact, humanity was deliberately isolated from galactic civilization as part of an experiment. Vryn's crystalline form caught the light as she manipulated a three-dimensional projection of the symbols they'd observed. The concepts translate imperfectly, but essentially, yes. The message indicates 17 advanced species, the precursors of our legends, engineered an experiment spanning millions of years. Experimenting on us? Lieutenant Commander Gavril asked, his typical enthusiasm dampened. On all sentient species, Vryn clarified. The message references something called developmental isolation theory. The precursors apparently divided this galaxy's emerging intelligent species into isolated regions, separated by vast empty spaces, impenetrable nebulae, or gravitational anomalies. Dr. Umbati leaned forward. Why would they do this? To observe different evolutionary paths of intelligence, Vryn replied. Some species were guided toward collective consciousness, others toward rigid hierarchical structures, and some, like humanity, were left entirely alone. That explains the quarantine zone around Earth in your records, Lieutenant Marquez noted, reviewing data from the Qualaxian navigation crystal. Your people knew about Earth but were forbidden from making contact. Not just my people, Vryn said. According to your historical records and our maps, 17 distinct civilizations developed in this galaxy, each unaware of the others, until they achieved specific technological benchmarks. Captain Riker stopped pacing. But something went wrong with the experiment. We weren't supposed to be out here yet, were we? The message indicates humanity has breached containment parameters approximately 8,000 years ahead of projected timelines, Vryn confirmed. Your species was expected to remain isolated within your local cluster for another 80 centuries before developing the technology to cross the void between spiral arms. A heavy silence fell over the room. How? Captain Riker finally asked. How did we do what 17 other species couldn't? Vryn's antennae twitched in the closest approximation of a shrug her physiology allowed. The message is unclear, but it references fundamental aberrations in probability processing among humans. Meaning? Prompted Dr. Umbati. I believe, Vryn said carefully, it refers to what you call hope your species' tendency to attempt what mathematical models deem impossible. Where Quillaxians see a 99% probability of failure and logically abandon an approach, humans focus on the 1% chance of success and proceed anyway. Lieutenant Commander Gavril laughed suddenly. So we broke the galaxies. Quarantine because we're too stubborn to accept statistical impossibility? Essentially, Vryn agreed. The Pathfinder itself demonstrates this. Your propulsion systems defy conventional models. They should not function at the efficiency levels you've achieved with your current technology base. Captain Riker's expression darkened. And now what? This precursor message. Is it a warning? Are we in danger? Not warning, Vryn corrected, manipulating the projection to highlight specific symbols. Invitation. The final segment indicates that the isolation phase has concluded prematurely and the integration phase must begin. Integration? Lieutenant Marquez straightened. You mean contact between all 17 civilizations? Correct. The structure appears to be some form of galactic communication hub designed to activate when isolation parameters were breached. Vryn's exoskeleton dimmed slightly, a sign of concern. However, we are proceeding thousands of years ahead of the intended timeline. The other species may not be prepared for integration, or they might not welcome the humans who broke the bait experiment, Captain Riker noted grimly. Perhaps, Vryn acknowledged. But consider this. In all Quillaxian history, no vessel has ever ventured this deep into the void between arms. Had your ship not found me, the Linarith would have become another mathematical data point confirming the futility of such exploration. Dr. Ombadi's eyes widened. You're saying we might be the only species capable of bringing everyone together? The only species irrational enough to try, Vryn corrected, her translator failing to convey the new respect in her tone. Captain Riker stared at the dormant structure on the view screen. So what happens now? As if responding to her question, the precursor artifact flared to life again, emitting 17 distinct energy signatures in different directions. I believe, Vryn said quietly, it has just notified all 17 civilizations of humanity's achievement and issued an invitation to this location. So we're about to have company, Captain Riker murmured. How long? Given known propulsion limitations of the 16 other species, Vryn calculated quickly, the first arrivals could appear within 14 standard cycles. 2 weeks, Lieutenant Commander Gavril translated. We have 2 weeks to prepare for first contact with 16 alien civilizations, none of whom were expecting to meet us for another 8,000 years. Captain Riker's lips curved into what Vryn now recognized as a determined smile. Then we'd better make a good first impression. The Muron vessel is hailing us again, reported Communications Officer Des Pellegrino. That's the 8th time in the last hour. Captain Riker sighed. Tell them the same thing we told the others. All diplomatic discussions will take place once all delegations have arrived. In the 10 days since the precursor artifact had sent its signal, 11 of the 17 civilizations had responded by sending ships to the coordinates. The space around the structure now resembled what Lieutenant Commander Gavril called the galaxy's most awkward cocktail party. Vessels of wildly different designs maintaining careful distances from one another, each suspicious of the other's intentions. Vryn stood at a specially designed console on the Pathfinder's bridge, correlating data from her own knowledge with the sensor readings of each new arrival. The Muron are particularly hierarchical, she explained. Their social structure demands they establish dominance rankings immediately upon meeting new species. Well, they'll have to learn patience, Captain Riker replied. We're not starting negotiations until everyone's at the table. The strategy had been Lieutenant Marquez's suggestion. Prevent any one civilization from forming alliances or establishing protocols before all 17 were represented. The humans called it leveling the playing field, another concept that had no direct translation in Qualaxian. "Sensor contact," announced the tactical officer. Emerging from the direction of the Cygnus arm, a new vessel appeared, its design unlike any they had seen so far. A massive living structure resembling a hybrid of coral and crystalline formations, pulsing with internal lights. "Ah!" Vrin's antennae quivered in recognition. "The Talaxian. Combine. My people have ancient records of limited contact with them before the isolation protocols were established. They are a Gestalt consciousness species, millions of individual entities sharing a communal mind." "Are they hostile?" Captain Riker asked. "Not hostile, but fundamentally challenged by individual consciousness," Vrin explained. "They perceive separate minds as damaged or incomplete." Captain Riker nodded thoughtfully. "Pellegrino, when they inevitably contact us, emphasize our respect for their unified nature, but be clear about our own individuality. That leaves only 4 species unaccounted for," Lieutenant Marquez noted, consulting his database. 3, corrected Vrin as another. Alert sounded. "The new arrival is almost certainly the Zal Imperium. The crystalline structure is similar to my own species, though their silicon matrices evolved along different paths." The Zal vessel was breathtaking, a perfect geodesic sphere composed of interlocking crystalline plates that shifted and reconfigured as they watched. "Reminds me of a puzzle box," Lieutenant Commander Gavril murmured. "An apt comparison," Vrin agreed. "The Zal approach all problems as mathematical exercises to be solved through geometric reconfiguration." As the hours passed, the final delegations arrived, the bioluminescent Eridani, who communicated primarily through light patterns, the gaseous collective intelligence of the Vosharans, and finally, the ancient Grin, whose massive world ship emerged from what appeared to be a self-generated spatial distortion. With all 17 civilizations represented, the precursor artifact activated fully, projecting a vast energetic pathway between itself and each vessel, including the Pathfinder. "It appears to be a transportation system," Vrin observed, "likely to a meeting space within the structure." Captain Riker called up the crew manifest on her console. "I need a delegation. Myself, obviously. Vrin, you're our expert on xenobiology now. Marquez for scientific analysis. Dr. Ombati for medical contingencies. And..." She paused, considering. "Gavril," Vrin suggested. "His adaptive thinking may prove valuable." Captain Riker raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Lieutenant Commander Gavril it is." The energy pathway materialized in the Pathfinder's transporter room as a shimmering tunnel of light. While the human delegation wore environmental suits as a precaution, instrument readings indicated the pathway maintained the optimal atmospheric conditions for each species traveling through it. Another impossibility, Vrin noted, the precursors appear to have mastered environmental adaptation at the quantum level. Captain Riker adjusted her helmet. "Ready for 17 impossible things before breakfast?" "I don't understand that reference," Vrin admitted. "You will," promised Lieutenant Marquez with a grin. "It's from a human story about adventures in impossible places." They stepped into the light. The chamber that materialized around them defied conventional spatial understanding. Though enclosed, it seemed to stretch infinitely, with 17 distinct sections arranged in a perfect circle. In each section stood the representatives of a galactic civilization, their environments seamlessly integrated yet separated by invisible barriers that allowed visual contact. In the center, a crystalline platform rose, displaying symbols that shifted and changed, a universal translator of far greater sophistication than anything humanity or the Qualaxians had developed. "This is unprecedented," whispered an insectoid being from the Muron delegation. "The precursor protocols indicated isolation for another 8 millennia. "The isolation experiment has concluded prematurely," announced a floating collection of luminous gases that comprised the Vosharan representative. Due to anomalous development patterns in Designation 17, all attention turned to the human delegation. "That would be us," Captain Riker said calmly. "Humanity of Earth. We apologize for disrupting your experimental timeline, but we're here now, and it seems the precursors intended for all 17 civilizations to meet eventually." "The question," rumbled the crystalline Zol representative, "is whether premature integration is viable. Some species clearly remain in developmental infancy." Infancy? Lieutenant Commander Gavril's voice carried an edge. "We crossed the void between spiral arms while the rest of you stayed in your designated playgrounds." Captain Riker shot him a warning glance before addressing the gathering. "What my officer means is that each civilization has developed unique strengths. Ours happens to be exploring where others said we couldn't go. And in doing so," Vryn added unexpectedly, "they saved my life when no Qualaxian vessel would have, ventured so far from established routes. Perhaps there is wisdom in what humans call improbability thinking." As tension simmered, the central platform activated fully, projecting what appeared to be a message from the precursors themselves. A complex mathematical equation that expanded and evolved before their eyes. "It's beautiful," breathed Dr. Ombati. "It's a test," corrected the Zol representative. "The final experiment begins." The mathematical equation hovering above the central platform grew increasingly complex, branching into 17 distinct but interconnected problems, one specifically tailored to each civilization's evolutionary approach to logic and problem-solving. "I understand our section," Captain Riker said, studying the human portion. "It's asking us to resolve an ethical paradox involving resource allocation during crisis situations. The Qualaxian section involves optimizing multi-dimensional navigational algorithms," Vryn noted. "A specialty of my people." Lieutenant Marquez moved closer to the projection. "Each species received a problem suited to their strengths. The Murans have a hierarchical organization challenge. The Vosharans got something about gas diffusion dynamics. But look at how they connect," Lieutenant Commander Gavril pointed out. "Each solution feeds into the others. We can't solve them independently." The realization rippled through the chamber. As each delegation came to the same conclusion, the final test required all 17 civilizations to cooperate, sharing their unique approaches to solve an integrated challenge. "This is the purpose of the experiment," declared the Gren representative, its ancient voice resonating through the universal translator. "The precursors divided us to develop specialized intelligences, then brought us together to achieve what none could accomplish alone. Initial cooperation proved difficult. The hierarchical Murans insisted on establishing a command structure. The collective-minded Talaxians couldn't comprehend why decisions required debate. The Eridani communicated solutions through light patterns that only Vryn's crystalline structure could partially interpret. Hours became days as the delegates worked. Captain Riker watched with growing concern as frustrations mounted and progress stalled. "We're approaching this wrong," she finally announced, interrupting a heated debate between the Zol and Vosharan representatives. "Each of us is still trying to solve our own puzzle piece while accommodating the others." "What alternative exists?" demanded the Muran delegate. "We teach each other," Captain Riker said simply. "Not just our solutions, but how we think." She turned to Vryn. "Officer Vryn, explain to everyone how Qualaxians approach spatial mathematics." Vryn hesitated only briefly before launching into an explanation of Qualaxian probability matrices and geometric optimization principles. To her surprise, the human delegates asked questions that no Qualaxian would consider. Intuitive leaps that bypassed established methodologies. Inspired, other delegations began sharing their fundamental approaches. The Talaxians demonstrated how a unified consciousness processed parallel problems simultaneously. The Zol revealed geometric reconfiguration techniques that simplified complex variables. Most surprising to Vryn was watching Lieutenant Commander Gavril integrate these disparate methodologies with human intuition, creating improvisational hybrid solutions that no single species would have conceived. Remarkable, the Gren delegate observed. The humans lack our individual specializations, but possess an uncanny ability to synthesize diverse approaches. It's because they developed in isolation from all influences, suggested the Eridani. Representative, its bioluminescent patterns translated into speech. Their cognitive evolution was unconstrained by established paradigms. As understanding grew, solutions emerged. Each delegation contributed their specialized knowledge while adopting complementary approaches from others. The central equation responded, its branches merging toward a unified solution. "We're close," Lieutenant Marquez announced, his excitement palpable. Every section is converging. In the final moments, when only one variable remained unsolved, the chamber fell silent. The equation required a value that none of their combined scientific principles could determine. It's not a scientific variable, Vryn realized suddenly. It's asking for a value judgment, a subjective assessment of acceptable risk versus potential benefit. A philosophical question disguised as mathematics, Captain Riker agreed. What value do we assign to the unknown? The 17 delegations debated furiously, each applying their cultural frameworks to this subjective challenge. Some argued for maximum caution, others for aggressive exploration. What if this isn't about finding the right answer? Lieutenant Commander Gavril suggested. What if it's about the process of deciding together? Captain Riker considered this, then stepped forward. I propose we each submit our independent assessments of this value, and the equation accepts the full spectrum of our perspectives. When they did so, entering 17 different values into the equation, the solution didn't fail as expected. It expanded, becoming more robust by incorporating their diverse approaches. The central platform erupted in light as the solution completed, revealing a message that translated differently for each species, yet conveyed the same meaning. Integration achieved. Phase 3 commences. The chamber transformed around them, its walls dissolving to reveal what appeared to be a vast repository of knowledge, the complete scientific, cultural, and historical records of the 17 precursor civilizations. They left everything for us, breathed Dr. Ombati. Their entire legacy. Not just for us, corrected Vryn, her translator struggling to convey her awe. For all of us together, no single civilization could have accessed this without the others. The Gren representative moved forward, its ancient form seeming somehow younger in the light of revelation. For millions of years, we believed ourselves to be the first intelligent life in this galaxy. Now we understand we are but the latest iteration of a far greater experiment. 17 paths of intelligence designed to eventually merge into something greater than the precursors themselves. Captain Riker turned to Vryn, her expression reflective. When your ship failed in the void between systems, you thought you were alone in the darkness of space. Until a human ship arrived, Vryn completed the thought. Defying all statistical probability. Perhaps that's what the precursors were counting on, Captain Riker suggested. Not just 17 specialized intelligences, but one species irrational enough to bring them all together. As the delegations began the monumental task of processing the precursor knowledge repository, Vryn observed the human delegation with new understanding. Their presence here defied logic, violated quarantine, and accelerated galactic evolution by 8 millennia, all because they had refused to accept the mathematical impossibility of crossing the void. The darkness between stars, Vryn realized, had never been about physical distance, but about the imagination needed to cross it. And humans, alone among the 17, had evolved to see possibility where others saw only emptiness. In the vast chamber of shared discovery, as 17 civilizations began their future together, Vrin's crystalline form refracted the light of new understanding that the universe's greatest darkness had never been the void between stars, but the spaces between minds. And humanity's greatest gift was the irrational, beautiful determination to cross both. "Officer Vrin," called Lieutenant Commander Gavril from across the chamber, where he was excitedly examining precursor technology with representatives from 3 different species. "You've got to see this. It's a map of 17,000 potentially habitable worlds that none of our civilizations have discovered yet." As Vrin moved to join this impromptu multi-species exploration team, she realized that the true legacy of the precursors wasn't the technology or knowledge they'd left behind. It was the 17 paths of intelligence now converging into something entirely new. And it had all begun because a human ship had arrived where no ship should have been, defying the darkness not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through the uniquely human quality of refusing to accept that some journeys were impossible. That, Vrin decided as she joined the excited group of former strangers now. Working as colleagues was perhaps the most important discovery of all.